1000xResist took 16 hours of my life, which I will never get back. My experience shifted from meh in the first half of the game to outright rage and annoyance. But since I'm a person who doesn't like to give in to strong emotions easily, who instead prefers to dissect them and get to their source, I braced myself and played this game till the very end, and went as far as to see all the endings. And here, in this video essay, I want to analyze what this game made me feel and try to separate where it rubbed me wrong personally and where my resistance towards it may have been an objective cause. So let's start. First of all, I classify 1000xResist as a visual novel and not a game. I like games and I hate visual novels, and especially I hate when I install something, hoping for a game, and I get dragged into a visual novel experience instead. So what's the difference between a visual novel and a game? A game acknowledges you as a player and lets you have a part in it. If it's a platformer game, the skill to traverse those platforms is your own. If it's a point-and-click adventure, you apply your brain in order to figure out what the game wants from you and solve this puzzle, etc. Taking an active part in what's happening on the screen allows you to become the game character and live through the story as your own. On the other hand, a visual novel drags you through someone else's experience. Though it's supposedly interactive, the choices you make barely affect anything in the ongoing narrative. Your role as a player is reduced to clicking next to reveal portions of text one by one. And to me, this is fine as long as there is not much effort. Then I can relax and just experience it as if it was a movie or a book. But then there are visual novels that pretend to be games and make you work for the next snippet of their story. You're given an illusion of agency as a character, while in reality you're just a puppet manipulated by game writers, made to do exactly what they need you to do. And in this game, it is working to a certain character and then choosing a certain dialogue option, or just walking somewhere, very often with no clear visual clue where. It kind of looks nice, and this in particular is one of the best visual parts of the story, but still it takes so long and so often is very frustrating. Another game that made me feel like this was The Wreck. But by the time I started getting tired of a feeling of being puppeteered to find and click interactable objects in 3D skins and deprived of my own agency, the game was already over. One walkthrough of 1000xResist has 10 chapters and epilogue, which lasted a total of 14 hours for me, plus a few more for the endings. I was so ready for the game to be over around chapter 6, and since then every new skin loading and requiring of me to traverse it all over again and find that single interactable object that will advance the story threw me into a rage-like mental state. By chapter 9 I hated the mechanics of this game so purely and violently that I could finish it only because I wanted to dissect my feelings later on and make them into this essay. The only part of the later game which I enjoyed was a time sequence where you are given 5 minutes to reach a certain point. As much as I disliked those 3D exploration sequences in the game prior to that moment, I loved having to do exactly the same at that exact moment, because finally I was acknowledged as a player. Finally my skill, whatever meager method, finally my own actions would yield the result of either game over if I failed, or let the story continue if I succeeded. Thanks to it, I could finally put myself inside the game and leave it for these short 5 minutes instead of being just a puppet on the screen of someone else's story. But these were only 15 minutes, including 2 times I failed out of 14 goddamn hours. It was nice, but it wasn't enough to make everything else worthwhile. So I peel off a first layer of my rage towards 1000xResist, that I was dragged into a visual novel, hoping it would be a proper game with proper choices, and it wasn't. This has happened before, okay. It's not the game's fault, but let's dissect it a bit more. There's a genre of a game which is called a walking sim and exploration, or to be specific, a 3D exploration game. And again, 1000xResist is not labeled as a walking sim or exploration, which contributes to parts of my rage, because I personally dislike these kinds of games. I dislike 3D media in general, partially because it literally makes me sick most of the time, and partially because I prefer the simplicity of 2D. And this game has different sequences with different kinds of view. Some of the sequences are more like 2.5D, where you see the character from the side and you do not have a to rotation access. Before purchasing 1000xResist, I took some time examining screenshots, and I hoped it would not be a full-on 3D game, except for maybe some cutscenes. I was deeply wrong. So maybe if you find with 3D exploration games and traversing different landscapes in 3 dimensions with to rotation access most of the time, and it's not annoying to you in any way and enjoyable on its own accord, you won't hate this game so much. These two elements are the fabric of the game: visual novels and walking sim 3D exploration. And if you do not enjoy these fabrics standalone, avoid this game at all costs, no matter what people around you say, no matter how overwhelmingly positive the reviews are. 100,000 lemons can't be wrong, or can they? And this brings us to the Beijing Opera, which is the one phenomena in the cultural world that I'd like to compare this game to, especially due to its Asian origins. The first thing to keep in mind is that Mandarin is very different from English. It's a tone language, and you need to have a trained musical ear to differentiate those tones from one another, something which is not a required skill for Western languages. Also, instead of an alphabet, usual for ours, it's built on thousands of hieroglyphs, each of these having its own meaning. The closest thing Western people have to that is memes and emojis, where one image can bring up a plethora of meanings which does not need to be expressed by words in the usual kinds of sense. And now imagine a whole language built like that. Surely those ears and brains are wired a bit differently. The traditional music and vocals in Beijing Opera lack the familiar Western concept of chords and their resolutions, which can and does sound dissonant to an untrained ear, like we have, up to the point of torture to sensitive types like me. It would be ironic to imagine that all the Chinese people throughout centuries were just pretending to like Beijing Opera, bound by social traditions, and everyone just sits there with straight faces while secretly hating it. It's a funny concept, but thinking like that would be extremely ignorant and disrespectful of totally different and elite culture, which is just wired differently and knows how to enjoy something we don't have the capacity to even understand. I remember I cried actual tears when the plot has finally reached its resolution, and not because it was that much cathartic, but because this torture was finally over. I found it funny as a concept in general to be happy, not because of the story told, but because you don't have to endure it anymore. And I did think about this experience a lot while playing 1000xResist. But then, could something make it up for me for being immersed into the genre of a game that I dislike? A good story for sure. Was this game's story good? Would I have loved it if it was 2.5D as I initially hoped? Unfortunately, no, not really. And let's now get into the story analysis in details. The game switching between different forms of character and skin view with no clear logic to it is a symptom of the larger problem 1000xResist has as a story, that it's trying to be everything but fails to be anything in particular. It feels a lot like a drug-induced fever dream where your inflamed mind just mixes everything together, trying and failing to make any sense of it. Each of the singular parts of the story could be nice and cool in its own way, but but they just fail to connect into one singular cohesive narrative. Describing the story, I can't help but imagine a pothead which talks about it to his equally high friend. Dude, there is this game. It's so cool. It's got those clones that live underground and worship the one human girl they are made from. Wow, and there are aliens which are totally not like us, dude, and they have those immense powers. So cool. And also there's this virus that they bring, and everyone has to wear a mask or they will die literally crying out from their eyes. So cool, yeah, dude. And there's only this one girl which is immune and that manages to communicate with them and destroys the rest of humanity, dude. So cool. These girls, these clones, they have their society and they kind of fall in love with each other. And there is a vibrator in the girl's room. But listen, dude, can you believe it? In the end, everything is a setup and they're not even made from this girl. And the original girl becomes kind of crazy because these aliens do not perceive time linearly and she's kind of immortal, but then she's killed. But not really, because she's back in the end, it's just a memory. Wow. And they all have to connect their minds together like one huge hive to see the truth and understand. Oh, so cool. Yeah, spoiler alert, in the very end, aliens leave, taking the virus with them. Girls finally come up to the surface, and one character that appears out of nowhere later in the story finally takes off her mask. Yeah, I'm clowning, but not really joking. The moment of catharsis of the story is taking off the damn mask. I understand totally that we all hated masks during the pandemic, but did we hate them that much? Or am I just that stupid to not get the story? Well, let's analyze it part by part and try to find out. I personally believe that us human beings have an inbuilt need to idolize and worship something or somebody. And since most of existing traditional religions have lost its appeal to modern educated people, there's a huge societal void that gets filled with pop stars, influencers, and all the kinds of fandoms. 1000xResist has a rather convincing imaginary cult, with a gothic cyber Lolita in stiletto shoes as the main object of worship, not desire, its own story of lost Eden and the fallen angel, Aki, ancient sister with her unforgivable, or spoiler alert, forgivable, sin, and needs symbolic language, sphere to square, hair to hair. Hekki, almost sister, and sister is an actual clone, a nearly identical genetic copy of yourself, which is a very neat concept indeed. No wonder this game could be loud amongst people with a void where faith or esoteric system could be. It could give them a chance to play pretend, being a part of a community, let them use the special language amongst themselves and feel the sense of connection that only belonging to a cult can give you. Moreover, the game starts with the Watcher, our main character, killing the Old Mother straight away, and then only she is introduced as a believer, brainwashed to the extent that she gets her best friend and supposedly lover killed over the blasphemy without any back thoughts. This immediately sets the narrative of a goddess dethroned, and as we play pretend this cult, we keep wondering, what is this revelation that the Watcher will learn to go from blind fanatism to outright killing her goddess with her own hands? That's a powerful lure, I get it, but I've experienced a real cult in my life and being disappointed in a godlike figure too, and I tell you, the way it's written there is flat. It takes much more to dethrone a goddess if you've been properly brainwashed. Moreover, my experience makes me immune to the allure of a play-pretend sci-fi cult in a similar way as the Old Mother Iris herself is immune to the alien virus. The part of the game which I genuinely loved was the alien or occupant invasion and the way these aliens are portrayed. The visual representation of those headless aliens with cyber thorn crowns was also much more striking than a high-heeled Lolita or Mother. Having those aliens unknowingly bring a virus with their presence alone, which makes humans cry endlessly till they expel all the water out of their bodies and die, is a hauntingly beautiful image. Too bad they never explained the connection. Similar to their Arrival movie, these aliens are so beyond human existence that they even lack the concept of life and death. Through cosmic horrors, they go about destroying the Earth and human race while just trying to communicate. And suddenly, the only person who is immune to the virus is also able to establish a communication link with them, and the fate of the world suddenly is in the hands of a teenage girl, yay! Who at that point is so traumatized and angry that she just wishes everyone dead. Which these aliens with their immense powers suddenly may come true. And this is where the story starts to fall apart and contradict itself, turning more and more into a mishmash of disconnected elements which are all maybe interesting and maybe alluring in their own accord, but which barely connect together as a single narrative. Starting from chapter 6, we learn things are not as they seem. The Watcher has been manipulated to start hating on the All Mother by the principal who implanted fake memories into the secretary. There are a few excellent examples of movies which execute the rug-pulling maneuver flawlessly. They are The House of Flying Daggers, a bit corny but an amazingly beautiful Asian story, and much more kinky and modern The Handmaiden. I absolutely love both of these movies and how they first tell a story from one perspective but then introduce just a few more facts to turn it upside down completely. And then once more. 1000xResist is trying to do the same by introducing this setup with the principal manipulating the memories and the actual truth being something else entirely. But the problem is neither before nor after the rug pull do we get a cohesive story. It's rug pulling for the sake of rug pulling. Like Iris's father making it to Hong Kong for his last moments, and we get this beautiful skin of a dialogue with the city, which of course is silent. And then a few scenes later, we find out he didn't actually travel there, but jumped out of the window. Okay, yeah, flying there for free in a ravaged post-apocalyptic world could only mean flying in his imagination, I get it. But why does the game suddenly need to be realistic here in particular? It fails to resolve why the clones become long-lived, nearly eternal, from being extremely short-lived. It shies away from the question how they manufacture their food, why there is a rundown Asian city underneath posh modern spa orchard. Okay, is it an essay on fallibility of human memory? Could be, except those aliens are portrayed being able to store those memories perfectly. The game contradicts itself seemingly for the sake of contradiction and nothing else, in a not so subtle hope that the player would confuse overwhelming what the heck feeling with a genuine awe. The dethroned goddess, the aliens beyond space and time, and the world in the hands of a teenage girl who didn't want to be turned into a goddess at all. This would have been enough to spin around a strong story, but it's not enough for the writers. It feels like they want to throw everything there is into their game. Here comes the forced immigration, political protests, family drama, school bullying, sleepwalking, and yes, there is indeed a vibrator in Iris's room, and maybe she should have taken it with her. Could help avoid the tragedy, you know. And then there is a plush whale, which is too big to fit into the bag, which I hoped could be a metaphor for the game trying to fit everything there is into its narrative and finally acknowledging doing so was a mistake. But I doubt that, sorry. Chinese cuisine seeks to balance out all the 5 tastes of sweet, sour, salty, spicy, and bitter in a single dish, but 1000xResist fails to do so, creating a mishmash which doesn't taste like anything at all, more like mixing too many different colors together, which result in an incohesive black-brown, a drug-induced fever dream. The final Rakpo is that the secretary, which was next to our character all along, is actually an instance of that occupant alien. Yes, the enemy we feared and hated was there hiding in plain sight all along, second time in a row, and wasn't an enemy at all. At this point, whatever, anything goes. So they need to summon their alien mother entity and then connect with two other secretary instances, which we never knew about, and then everyone can join their minds together and see what really happened, hoping that all the societal tension, all the unfairness will be resolved thanks to the truth. But it doesn't. If you choose the future without intervention, the main characters will be killed by either of the two protagonists, thus resulting in game over and reset of the ending sequence. If I had any trace of belief that this game is any clever, I would see it as self-irony. If our story is so incohesive, of course, revealing the sad story, aka the truth, to everyone will change absolutely nothing. Everyone would take it as a sad fever dream and just go on with their lives. What the heck was that? Oh, let's just continue what I was doing before, no changes. But the game is not that clever and not that deep, and in order to reach one of the two true endings, which award complete the game achievements, you have to eliminate certain protagonists and keep certain characters. Justice for the Zhao ending raised the most question for me. As we are choosing whom to keep and whom to eliminate, we're not only talking about their physical existence, but also about any trace of memory of them. Then how come Blue is so remorseful that Zhao's didn't get their justice? She should have forgotten them entirely. Yet another example of contradiction and lack of cohesion in this game. Then there are also several choices that do not matter at all. There is Chris, who gets the only scene in the whole game with an affectionate human contact when Blue hugs her, and yet, if Blue chooses to eliminate her, there is not much commentary and no difference. There is Iris Reborn, the supposed exact genetic copy of the deceased old mother, and if she and her believers are eliminated, that also does not matter at all for the final outcome. I'd love to see yet another one to pop up regardless, because people need someone perfect to worship. It's in their nature. Some weeds just grow no matter how many times you pluck them, but no. And then there is Blue herself. I kinda hoped she would be the watcher with reset memory, who would then remember everything, but no. She's a whole new person of her own, but she's only a MacGuffin there to move the plot along, and having to play as her suddenly in the middle of the game feels out of nowhere. Once again, by trying to comment on everything at all at once, 1000xResist fails to provide any cohesive commentary on anything particular. It could have been self-ironic in a true postmodern way by showing that anything goes and nothing matters, and the truth changes nothing, but it's just not that clever. To my personal opinion, 1000xResist is a generic-looking, generic-feeling sci-fi for people who haven't been exposed to most of the masterpieces that this game possibly draws inspiration from, so they can take a generic copy for revelation. Meh. It truly is meh. V-O meh. Everything about this game feels very generic to me. The franchise spa orchard, colored sci-fi overalls with some random stiletto heels, sheeps, caverns, skyscrapers. It doesn't look bad, but somehow there was nothing there at all which would look original. Nothing which would make me think this is the first time I see something like that. Maybe time switching, and I hoped at first I'd need to solve some puzzles across different times. But all the puzzle solving is limited to entering the space which is closed off in another time. Nothing more clever than that. And don't get me started on the train sequence where you have to run back and forth between the characters. It's absolutely ridiculous. I can go on forever about things that do not work. A hairline crack in the mask that can kill you, but do you forget the virus can enter through the eyes? The advanced genetic modifications, clone growing, yet the watcher needs to to wear ordinary glasses. It's all lazy writing, lazy world building, lazy collection of assets. It sacrifices meaning for the aesthetic, which is not even that good. 1000xResist pretends to be something, but it doesn't even know what exactly it pretends to be. It doesn't connect. It doesn't fulfill its function. So yeah, I'm not going to get back the 16 hours that this game took from me. Honestly, I don't even want to think about it anymore. Aside of cool aliens, I wish I could just forget the rest of the cyber candy stiletto nonsense this game was. And luckily, eventually I will. Those aliens may preserve Iris perfectly in their memory, but I, a mere human being, will need just a few other good games to get it out. I'm so glad to possess the fallible human memory. I stand on the cliff top looking at the sea of overwhelmingly positive ratings of this game, but I am not alone here. And those few scattered negative reviews speak about just the same that I mentioned here. In the description of the video, I'm going to include links to the actual works of art, which could be much better use of your time than this game. And for the final dissonant chord, Alma's stiletto shoe from the very ending of the game. Is she back? Or is it just a memory? Oh, I'm so glad I don't care about this anymore. I'm done with this game. I'm going to start to forget it now. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.